level, as it was mentioned, eco-anxiety, eco-grief, and eco-guilt is in the focus of my researches, and behavior level. So on behavior level, our main question is that how these cognitive and affective reactions are related to pro-environmental behavior, and what are the possibilities to turn these cognitive and affective reactions into pro-environmental behavior for coping and adaptation to climate change. Okay, and okay, so just to start our work, first we thought about the possible clarification of the mental health impacts of climate change. It's based on Doherty and Clayton's work, and we use this classification that there are physical-social impacts caused by droughts and other climate change related events, and this psychological physio-social impacts are like migrations and other big social issues created by climate change. There are on a personal level, there are indirect impacts of climate change, like a sense of threat due to the unpredictability of the future, and like ecoemotions, and there are direct impacts and like acute traumatic events in the case of floods and other events, which is another kind of psychological challenge. But we are, and the next slide, please, Chilla. And now we are concentrating on the indirect effects and mainly eco-emotions. And this is the expertise area of Chilla. So I give the floor, or rather the screen, to Chilla.
Thank you, Attila. So we decided to focus on eco-emotions because we are located in Hungary, and in our interview study, which I will present in a few moments, we experienced that people have sometimes low risk perception related to the direct effects, but they are quite anxious about the future events. So it seemed to be a global phenomena which is important to study. So what are these eco-emotions? I will show you a taxonomy developed by Panu Pikala. It was published last year, and I think it's a very important taxonomy based on many research conducted in this field so far. As you can see in this figure, there are a lot of kinds of emotions which people can experience related to climate change, but there is only one category for positive emotions. So it's much more or less frequent than the negative emotions. It contains hope, motivation, interest, compassion, optimism, for example. According to some researchers, it can be important to focus on these emotions when we try to cope with climate change, but it can be a double-edged sword. I will speak about this later in relation to some of our studies. In the current presentation, I will focus on in the other side, you can see that there are very strong negative emotions as well, strong anxiety, strong depression. And in our presentation, we will focus on three groups of emotions, which are the most studied phenomena, like eco-anxiety, which incorporates threat and strong anxiety, also the not really depression and sadness, but let's call it ecological grief, which was also studied in the last few years. And also we studied eco-guilt and eco-shame. I will speak shortly about this phenomena in the next slides. So when do we feel guilty? In general, when we recognize or believe that we have caused harm to either to our group or another groups or another person, and it motivates us to make efforts. Sorry, I can see something in, someone drew something in here, or no, hopefully.
Yes, I'm going to make sure that anyone we don't recognize is removed immediately. I'm sorry about this.
Okay. Now I try to focus on the text, and hopefully you can do the same. So eco-guilt is a special type of guilt which we experience when we feel that we violated some environmental norms with our actions, and according to these studies, it can encourage people to make pro-environmental actions. We wanted to examine it in our own studies as well. The other phenomena is ecological anxiety. Maybe the most common definition is that it is a kind of chronic fear of environmental doom. But I listed two other definitions here too, which is a topic of debate whether eco-anxiety is a natural phenomena or whether it is similar to clinical anxieties. So far, researchers think that that eco-anxiety is rather a normal reaction to this environmental threat in the future. However, it does include some symptoms of cognitive or functional impairment, like inability to concentrate in work or in school, or inability to sleep, or crying when seeing the news in the media. So the question is open whether it can be paralyzing or it can motivate for action. According to a recent study, a very high amount of young people and children experience extreme or at least moderate anxiety, and they also feel some or experience some functional impairment related to this. So it's important to do more studies on this reaction. And the last phenomenon is ecological grief, which were examined mostly in indigenous communities, for example, among Inuits, and also in Australian farmers who experience this kind of reaction when they saw that the landscape is changing around them, and they lose their identity due to these changes. So it's kind of experiences a loss and feeling grief about it. So what we learned from our recent studies, we started with an exploratory approach. So we conducted semi-structured interviews to get a deeper knowledge about this phenomena, and we published it last year. There were more female in this study than male participants, but all of the participants felt that they were experiences the consequences of climate change in some ways. We had 8 themes related to eco-guilt. You can see it in this figure: 6 themes for eco-anxiety and 2 themes for ecological grief, and also 6 themes for coping. Due to the time restrictions, I can't go into details, but you can see some examples here. So, for example, for guilt, there is also self-criticism, which is a milder version of guilt, which can motivate for action, but also there is some kind of existential guilt. So I'm not a plant, so I can't do any good to the planet, so I feel guilty because I'm breathing. So it can be a quite paralyzing type of guilt. Also, I have some examples here, like the dilemma of harm, For example, at the same time, I have to think about if my products include tropical fruit in January, which is not seasonal at all. Am I doing more damage than he does by using plastic bags? So the person becomes paralyzed by the too much information and lack of knowledge. Okay, so in study 2, we formed some questionnaires from this topic. So we developed an eco-guilt, an eco-grief, and an eco-anxiety questionnaire, which we also published last year. We conducted multiple factor analysis in a quite huge sample in the Hungarian population. And here you can see the questionnaires. The eco-guilt and eco-grief questionnaires were one-factor scales or one-factor questionnaires, but the eco-anxiety questionnaire had 2 factors, the habitual ecological worry and the negative consequences of anxiety. And the total score of these questionnaires and subscales had a weak but positive association with pro-environmental behavior, which is an important result, even though it is cross-sectional data, so we don't know anything about the causality. Here are some examples for the questionnaires or the questionnaire items. For example, for habitual ecological worry, it comprises mostly the emotional